Hello everyone, I am Laethas and welcome back again for another video. Today I have my manga haul for the month of June 2019, and without further ado, let's get right into this. To start off with, I have volume 9 of Kiss and White Lily for My Dearest Girl. Now, we only have one more volume of this series before it is complete over here in English as volume 9. I haven't read this one yet. I've not read volume 8. I've read through volume 7, and then I heard that it ends at volume 10, and I've just decided I'm just going to wait until volume 10 comes out to read 8, 9, and 10 all at once. As far as the story contents go, this is very much a Yuri story. Very innocent in terms of like the romance, that kind of thing. It's more of a Yuritopia-esque series. It doesn't focus on one couple in particular, though one is more reoccurring, and it, kind of comes in and out of the story at different points. But it is mostly about just a bunch of different couples and just sort of short stories about them getting together, that kind of thing. It usually was doing about like one couple per book. Now it's kind of diversified a little bit more, but it usually still kind of sticks to that formula. But as I've said, it goes in and out. If you are a big Yuri fan, you might consider looking into this one. But if you're not a fan of a bunch of, mini romances, then you might not enjoy this one as much. But again, it is a Yuri story, so if you're a big fan of Yuri, you will probably still enjoy this series because it does provide that experience for you. But that is volume 9 of Kiss and White Lily for My Dearest Girl. Next up, I have the final volume of Little Witch Academia, volume 3. This kind of follows the anime, not either of the two films. The one that was, I believe, for the Young Animator Training Project, or the other kind of sequel film that it ended up, it was popular enough to warrant that, so they made that. This one more follows the anime, like, full TV series, though not entirely. It makes reference to some of the things that happened there, it retells some of the events that happened there, but it also has a little bit of its own sort of stories thrown in there, so it's kind of weird in that sense that it is part just retelling the anime, and in parts original material. So that's kind of interesting. As far as would I recommend it, I'd really only recommend it if you're a big fan of Little Witch Academia. It's not excellent. I thought the artwork could get confusing at times because of some of the action sequences. It's kind of hard to tell what was going on. Though it is rather short and at only $10 per volume, which is kind of odd for yen press pricing. It really isn't that big of an investment to get the whole series, but in my opinion, it was just alright, and unless you are a big Little Witch Academia fan, I don't know if the series has very much to offer if you don't already know a lot about Little Witch Academia, but that is the third and final volume of Little Witch Academia. Next up, I have the third and final volume of Yuri Bear Storm. Oddly enough, the cover picture is the same as it is on volume 2. I want to say that's a misprint. But this series is wacky and weird, so that could be entirely intentional, though I highly doubt it. Yeah, as I've said, third and final volume, Yuri Bear Storm. It's short and is real weird. Unless you're looking for a story that has, like, the weirdness factor, like, way off the scale, then I really have no idea if you will enjoy this or not, because if you're not looking for something crazy and wacky, then it really is a grab bag as to whether or not you're going to enjoy it. I thought it was decent and alright, though I wouldn't say it was a standout, at least not for me. But if you are looking for a series that's real weird, real wacky, then this might be one to look into. Again, it is quite short at only 3 volumes, and it has a little bit of that Yuri thrown in there. Yeah, it's mostly going to depend on that wackiness, and if you're looking for that wackiness, then this might be one to go for. Other than that, I really have no idea. It's a coin flip. But yeah, that is the third and final volume of Yuri Bear Storm. And next up, I have volume 4 of My Boy. There are a total of, I believe, 6 volumes out in Japan right now, so we're pretty close to the number of volumes in Japan. We're pretty close to catching up with the story. As for the story itself, it's more in a slice-of-life direction where one of the characters has kind of become a surrogate mother for this character right here. How it develops in the future is kind of up in the air right now, so if that type of content is going to seriously bother you, you may want to hold off on this series until sort of that becomes more clear as the series progresses. As far as if I've been enjoying the series, I have been enjoying the series. I've read volumes 1 and 2, and I will probably backlog a few more volumes before I continue to get into the series, but as of right now, I have been enjoying the series a lot, and I will continue to be picking it up. But anyway, that is My Boy Volume 4. Next up, I have I Married My Best Friend to Shut My Parents Up by Kodama Naoko. Now, this is a short single-volume series by the same creator as NTR Netsuzo Trap, though this series has a drastically different tone than that series does. For one, this one focuses on adult characters as opposed to high schoolers, and the romance is less skeezy in the sense that they're doing things that are morally questionable. As for the story itself, I did really enjoy this story. It's nice to kind of get a Yuri about more adult characters. And if you're looking for more of a different Yuri and you're a big Yuri fan, I would definitely recommend checking this series out. It is very short at just this one volume, kind of thin as well. But I definitely really enjoyed this series, and it kind of gives me like a different perspective because this author has obviously written stories with drastically different tones than this one, so I'd be interested to see what more of her works are about. As for just kind of like a standalone story, it's okay, it's decent, but I think unless you're a Yuri fan, you're not going to get as much out of this one as you probably could if you are a big fan of Yuri. This one is mainly for that kind of audience, but then again, it is a short and sweet single volume, just kind of a romance story, so if that is what you are in the market for, then I might recommend giving this a read. But anyway, that is the single volume series, I Married My Best Friend to Shut My Parents Up. Next up, I have Volume 9 of Nurse Hitomi's Monster Infirmary, and this series continues to be underappreciated. I think this is an absolutely fantastic series that I don't see enough of. It handles kind of more in-depth and complex topics in a very simplistic yet complete way, and it's kind of baffling to me how the author is able to condense sort of a complex idea into as short of a package as they are able to do in some of these short stories. But it is very fascinating, very intelligently written, which is not what I expected initially when going into it. I thought this was just kind of going to be a fun fan service comedy series with some lighthearted elements in there, and it does have those lighthearted elements and those fan service comedy moments, but it also has really good kind of discussion on more complex topics that you wouldn't expect to see from a series like this. You might have just heard some fireworks going off. It is getting close to the 4th of July. If you live in the United States, you know exactly what that is. And if you live abroad, you probably also have an idea of what that is. But you may hear those going off in the background. I hope that that does not cause any problems. But anyway, back to Nurse Hitomi's Monster Infirmary. If you have not checked this series out, I highly recommend giving it a go. I think you are going to get a lot more out of it than what you would expect. I'd give it 1, 2, maybe even 3 volumes, and I think you'll absolutely love it because of the way it handles its material in such an intelligent and well-crafted manner. I cannot give this series really much more of a recommendation, and I highly suggest you go check this one out. Next up, I have The Ancient Magus Bride Supplement 2. This is very similar to the first supplement. It's just kind of going along each volume and just kind of explaining a bunch of different things about the story. Unless you're a big Ancient Magus Bride fan, this is probably not entirely necessary. It's more of like a fan material, guidebook-esque type thing. So unless you're a really big Ancient Magus Bride fan or you're a big-time collector, you have to have everything, you're a big completionist, I wouldn't really recommend this. But if you are one of those collecting types or you absolutely adore the series, then I would recommend picking this up because it is kind of neat and cool just to kind of, get walkthroughs of the volumes, kind of like what's happening in each. But it's just kind of a cool little booklet thing. Not pertinent to understanding the series, but it gives some extra information that if you really like the lore of the series, you will probably enjoy. But that is the Ancient Magus Bride Supplement 2. Next up, I have Love Ru Omnibus Volume 7. And I don't really think I have much explaining for this series. It's fairly well known. Romance comedy, kind of monster girl, but not really. More just kind of supernatural, wacky, weird, harem type stuff going on in this series. This is an omnibus, as you can see right there, 13 to 14. There are 2 more of these coming out, and this is a fun harem rom-com series. And if you're in the market for a fun rom-com, I would recommend checking this out. There is some fan service moments in this, so do be mindful of that. If fan service is a really big turnoff for you, then maybe stick away from this one. But if fan service doesn't really bother you or is a plus for you, then I would recommend checking this series out. It's just a fun rom-com. I've been backlogging a few of these volumes until the rest of the series comes out, which should be relatively soon. There are only 2 more omnibuses left to come out. But of what I have read of Love Ru, I really enjoyed it. And it is really just one of those more laid-back, lighthearted romance comedies with a harem twist thrown in there. But I've been really enjoying Love Ru. If you're looking for a rom-com, maybe with some harem aspects to it, I would recommend checking it out. Next up, I have the omnibus for Elfen Lied, the first omnibus. Now, these are 3-in-1s, so there are going to be 4 of these omnibuses. I was slightly disappointed with the omnibuses. I would have much rather them have been the same quality as something like the Wish omnibus, which Dark Horse recently released. That is a much nicer quality build for a book, but these are not awful. The spine isn't the best, but at least the pages are nice and thick. So, you don't get as much bleed through and they feel sturdy, that kind of thing. And I recently watched the Elfen Lied anime and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. So I've decided to go pick up the manga because I know it's a little bit different, especially towards the end of the series. As for the manga, I don't know a whole lot about what is different about the manga itself. I've just seen the anime, but be mindful. There is some nudity. There is a lot of gore. Be mindful of that. If that stuff bothers you, maybe steer clear of the series. But from what I saw in the anime, I enjoyed it a lot and a lot more than I was expecting. So I'm really anticipating enjoying this series, but I really don't know what to expect from the manga version because I don't know what is different and what is the same. But this is the first omnibus for Elfen Lied. Next up, I have Yuri Is My Job, Volume 3. I have read the first volume of this series, and I am just going to backlog several volumes before I continue. This is a Yuri story, but it begins a little bit differently than most tend to begin, in that our character isn't in love with anybody, and probably the main love interest, I'm going to assume this character is the main love interest, is also not a big fan of our main character. So that's a little bit atypical in the sense that our main character has no romantic interest in any of the other characters, and our main probable love interest actually dislikes our main character to a quite somewhat significant degree. So it's going to be interesting how the series proceeds going forward, but I'm interested in seeing how it does. This is a Yuri series, so your enjoyment factor for this series is going to depend on whether that is your kind of story or not. Obviously, if you're a Yuri fan, that's going to be a big plus in how much you enjoy the series. If you don't particularly care for Yuri, it's not necessarily going to hurt your enjoyment of the series. You're just not going to enjoy it as much as you would if you were a big fan of Yuri. But I have been enjoying this one, and if you are a Yuri fan, I would recommend checking it out. And if you're in the mood for more of a romance drama with some comedy thrown in there, I don't know which is going to be more prevalent, either the drama or the comedy. It's kind of hard to tell, only having read one volume. Then, depending on if you want one of those, then I would recommend giving this a look. But definitely would recommend for you Yuri fans out there. I definitely loved that first volume, and I'm excited to see where the series goes. Next up, I have Inside Mari, Volume 4. I've talked about this series before. I'm a big Shuzo Oshimi fan, and this work in particular I absolutely love. I think the way that he goes about handling the subject matter is very interesting and well thought out. Some people have told me, dear third manga, that he saw the twist at the end coming from a mile away. It's been a long time since I've read it, so I can't remember how quickly I was able to figure it out, if I was able to figure it out. But your enjoyment may hinge on that, or you may be like Gear and just dislike it outright. But I really enjoyed this series, and if you are an Oshimi fan, I would recommend checking it out. It's very similar to his other stories. I feel like a lot of his series are either like extraordinarily similar, like borderline the same. But I love every single one of them. And if you're a big Oshimi fan, I would definitely recommend checking this series out. As for his other works, I know Happiness is currently being released in English, as well as Flowers of Evil, which has completely released in English. If you liked either one of those works, then I would recommend checking out Inside Mari. I give it a very, very high recommendation from me, unless you're not looking for more of a darker toned series, then maybe steer clear, because this is not lighthearted at all. But yeah, Inside Mari Volume 4. Next up, I have Ran in the Grey World Volume 3. I loved this series from the onset. Volume 1, it was one of the 5 series from 2018 that I recommended checking out, or being sort of the highlights of that year, at least that I read. Now, the series does have a little bit of controversial material, seeing as our main character is very young, and when she puts on these magic shoes, she transforms into a very voluptuous and good-looking older woman. But as we, the reader, know, she's very young, whereas most of the other cast does not. And one of the main characters happens to be a man who is much older than her. He's in his, I believe, late 20s or early 30s, and he does not know that she is as young as she is, and so a lot of his behavior could be seen as being problematic, since you, the reader, know how young that she actually is. So if that is bothersome to you, then I might recommend giving this series a pass. But if you want to see how the story develops, or if you're just very fascinated with Aki Irie's artwork and the series' just kind of whimsical nature, then I would definitely recommend checking this one out. I really want to see how the series develops and what ends up going on with Ran, but I absolutely love the first volume, and I cannot wait to see where this series goes and how Ran's sort of relationships develop with her family, her mother, and just kind of everyone else in the story, since it really is a lot of focus on her. But yeah, Volume 3 of Ran and the Grey World. Next up, we have Prison School Volume 13. That is Omnibus Volume 13. Only one more of these to go. I've said a lot about Prison School before. There was an anime that came out, I believe, 2015. So it's been a while since then. This series is an absurdist comedy. That is it at its core. The things that happen are ludicrous, bonkers, absurd, utterly, completely off the wall crazy. So a lot of the comedy is playing off of the ridiculous nature of the situation of the characters, if that's not your kind of comedy, or that's not the comedic style that you particularly enjoy, or you actively dislike it, then I would steer clear of this series. But if you love that kind of humor, then I would definitely recommend checking this one out, because this one has a lot of that in store for you. And it is quite long as well, so it has a lot of that comedy for you, and the story does progress over time, so it doesn't feel like things are stalling or just kind of being stationary. The plot does progress as the series goes along, but a lot of the weight of the series is mostly in that absurdist comedy nature that the series is kind of, I guess, known for, and it really does quite well. So if you're looking for an absurdist comedy, I'd recommend getting into Prison School. Only one more omnibus till the series is complete at Omnibus 14, but that is Prison School Omnibus Volume 13. And last up for this haul, I have Aria, the Masterpiece Volume 2. Now this is kind of a little bit misleading, since it does say Volume 2, but this is technically the first volume of the main Aria series, because the first Aria, the Masterpiece, is the prequel series Aqua. So be aware of that if you're getting into this series. The first volume is technically Aqua, and this second volume is where the Aria story proper actually starts, even though they're very closely connected to one another, since Aria is the direct sequel to Aqua. But these volumes are quite nice. They have nice French flaps. If you've been following this channel for an amount of time, you will know that I adore French flaps. I think they are nice and awesome. As for the quality of the build on the book, it is very nice. You can see right there. I'm going to blind you guys with the metallic spine right there. Tokyo Pop did a really nice job with the build on these books. I was actually quite impressed. They do come at a $25 price tag, but they are 2-in-1s, and the build quality is quite nice, so the price tag isn't as bad as I thought it was initially upon just looking at it without having the book in hand to sort of feel out if it is worth it. I've been enjoying the series a ton. It's very calming, very relaxing. Not a whole lot of stuff happens, but it's just kind of nice to read and relax. And if that's the kind of story you are looking for, then I would recommend checking out Aria. If you love Flying Witch, this is in that same vein of very calming, very relaxing with some comedic moments thrown in there. If you enjoyed Flying Witch, would definitely recommend picking up Aria as well. But this is Aria, the Masterpiece, Volume 2. Alright, and that will do it for my manga haul for the month of June 2019. A little bit late on this one. This is coming out sort of at the beginning of July, so a little late on the trigger there. But if you have any questions about any of the series that I hauled this month, please do leave your comments down below, as well as sort of your thoughts if you've read any of the series that I listed here, or just questions about the channel in general. Let me know your recommendations for series. What series have you been reading? What series featured here do you absolutely love and cannot wait for more physical volumes to be printed? And as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and share. And if you'd like to keep up to date with all of my content, you can hit that subscribe button, ring that notifications bell, and or follow me on Twitter. There's a link to that in the description down below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, leave those in the comments section below the video as well. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this manga haul for the month of June 2019. I am Laethas. Goodbye.